Hey there. Ready to dive into some really fascinating turning points in history? And we're not just talking dates and names. We're going deep into the events that really shook civilizations.
Yeah,
Unexpected connections, those moments where you're like, hold on, what? That makes studying the past so captivating.
definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. And the sources you found for this deep dive are amazing.
Oh, yeah.
We're talking mysterious collapses, ambitious leaders, unlikely heroes, the works. I am ready to unpack all of this.
I am too, and I think a good place to start would be with a period of utter chaos. Around 1200 BCE, everything kind of fell apart. The Bronze Age collapse.
Oh, yeah?
Imagine civilizations that had thrived for centuries. I mean, we're talking the Mycenaeans, the Hittites.
Right.
Even the mighty Egyptians were hit hard.
Yeah.
But the real question is, why?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question right there. The sources mention these sea peoples. They were like these enigmatic raiders who just kind of appeared out of nowhere. But were they like the main cause or just one element in this larger web of instability? See, what's really interesting is some sources point to this perfect storm scenario. So think about it. You've got the sea peoples, but then you've also got natural disasters happening at the same time.
Oh, no.
Like earthquakes,
Oh, gross.
prolonged droughts. It was kind of this combination of factors creating a domino effect across the late Bronze Age world.
So it wasn't just one thing. It was like this confluence of catastrophes.
Exactly.
That's both fascinating and terrifying at the same time. I mean, to try and rebuild after something like that, it's almost unimaginable.
Yeah, it makes you think about the resilience of those who lived through it. And speaking of resilience, what emerged from this collapse is a testament to how cyclical history can be. You see new civilizations like the Greeks and Phoenicians, they rise to prominence, they inherit these fragments from the old world, and then they forge their own paths.
Okay, that's a great point. It's easy to just focus on the collapse, but new societies emerged. Like innovation and the development of culture didn't just stop.
Nope.
That's an important reminder that history is never static. It's constantly evolving.
Right?
Often in unexpected directions.
Absolutely. Now, let's shift gears a bit. We've talked about these big societal shifts, but now let's talk about the impact of individuals. Your next source takes us to ancient Rome.
Okay.
And when we think about powerful figures in Roman history, Julius Caesar instantly comes to mind. He was a brilliant military strategist, a savvy politician, and let's be honest, incredibly ambitious.
Yeah.
His decision to cross the Rubicon River, that was a pivotal moment.
Oh, yeah. That's one of those events that's become legendary. Even someone like me, who's not a Roman history expert, knows that crossing the Rubicon was a big deal.
Oh, yeah.
What made it so significant, it basically meant there was no turning back.
Exactly. It was a declaration of war, Caesar versus the Roman Senate. But it goes deeper than just a military conflict. This clash, as your source points out, gets to the heart of a tension that's always existed throughout history. The ambition of a powerful person versus the ideals of a republic.
Okay, so it's about more than just who would win the war.
Right.
It's about what kind of system Rome would have. Caesar's ambition, his desire to be the one in charge, to centralize power, it went against everything the Senate represented. No wonder they clashed.
Exactly.
But we know how Caesar's story ends. And it's not exactly a happy ending.
No, not at all.
What happened?
Caesar's assassination at the hands of his own senators, it reminds us that even the most powerful figures, they're not invincible.
Right.
And here's where it gets really interesting. His death, as dramatic and shocking as it was, it actually paved the way for the Roman Empire.
Wow.
Talk about unintended consequences.
Wow. So the very thing those senators were trying to prevent by assassinating Caesar, the rise of a single, all-powerful ruler, ended up happening anyway because of their actions.
Exactly.
It makes you think about those ripple effects, how an action that's intended to have one outcome can lead to something completely different.
Precisely. Now, from a powerful emperor, let's journey to 15th century France. Let's explore the story of an unlikely hero, Joan of Arc. Okay, imagine. You're a young peasant girl, barely a teenager. You claim to hear voices from saints.
What?
And then you convince a king to let you lead his army. Talk about audacious.
I know, right? Her story sounds like something straight out of a movie. France at this time was totally embroiled in the 100 Years' War.
Yeah.
And then Joan shows up, driven by this unwavering faith and determination. But she actually had military success, right?
She did. Your sources highlight the Siege of Orleans, a pivotal battle in the war. The French were demoralized, on the verge of defeat. Joan appears, rallies the troops, and leads them to victory. It's a real testament to the power of belief, both hers and the belief she inspired in others.
Okay, I'm getting chills just thinking about it. It's such a powerful story of courage and faith. But we both know history can be brutal. What happened to Joan?
Sadly, Joan's story takes a tragic turn. Despite her military triumphs and the impact she had on French morale, she was captured by the English and then accused of heresy, basically challenging the authority of the church, and put on trial.
That's awful. So wait, is that why she was burned at the stake? Because she claimed to hear voices from saints? Like they thought she was possessed or something. It's hard to imagine how those accusations could lead to such a horrific punishment.
It really reflects the complexities of that era. Religion and politics were completely intertwined, and Joan's claims, her influence, threatened those in power. She became a pawn in this much larger game. But here's something to consider. Despite her tragic end, Joan of Arc's story still resonates today, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah.
She was later canonized as a saint, solidifying her place as both a historical figure and this symbol of faith and courage.
Absolutely. It's a good reminder that history isn't always neat and tidy, and often the people we remember most are the ones who challenge the norms, even if it costs them everything. Now, from one controversial figure to another, let's talk about Christopher Columbus.
Oh boy.
It's 1492, and Columbus sets sail with this goal of finding a westward route to Asia.
Right.
Instead, he stumbles upon, well, I think we all know the story.
The Americas. Columbus was aiming for the East Indies, and he landed in the Caribbean. That sparked a chain of events that would reshape the world as he knew it. Now, while his voyage is undoubtedly a landmark moment in history, it's crucial to recognize the complex and frankly devastating consequences that followed.
It's a side of the story that's often glossed over, especially when we're talking about the age of exploration.
Right.
But it's impossible to ignore the negative impacts colonization, the decimation of indigenous populations, and the horrors of the transatlantic slave trade. It's a stark reminder that what one group might see as progress or exploration, can have devastating consequences for others. Columbus's story isn't just about like, oh, look, he discovered new lands. It's about the clash of cultures, the horrible impact of disease, conquest. It's that complex legacy of colonialism that we're still dealing with today.
Precisely. And that brings us to our final deep dive today, the Industrial Revolution. It's a period defined by innovation, this dramatic shift from these agrarian societies to industrialized ones. The sources you gave me highlight people like James Watt,
Okay.
Richard Arkwright, and their inventions, the steam engine, the water frame, weren't just clever gadgets.
Right.
They were catalysts for profound changes in society.
It's mind-blowing, really, when
Yeah.
you think about it. The sheer scale of the transformation, factories popping up everywhere, mass production becoming the norm, it completely changed how people lived and worked. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And these inventions you mentioned, they weren't just changing industries.
Right.
They were changing like the very fabric of society.
Exactly.
Take the water frame, for example.
Here.
Your research mentioned how it totally transformed the textile industry.
Absolutely. Before the water frame, if you wanted to make textiles,
Yeah.
that was largely a cottage industry.
Yeah.
Individuals, families working at home. But Arkwright's invention, he used water power to automate the spinning process.
Wow.
So that led to the rise of factories. Suddenly, you've got large numbers of people working together under one roof.
Yeah.
The pace of production just skyrockets.
Oh, wow.
This shift from small-scale home-based production to large-scale factory work had a seismic impact on labor, on family structures, even on where people lived as they moved to be closer to these industrial centers.
It's a classic example of how one invention can have these ripple effects.
Yes.
And not just change how something is made, but the entire social and economic landscape.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, though, were people aware of how big these changes were as they were happening? Like, did they realize they were living through a revolution?
That's a question historians are still debating today.
Really?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there was certainly this awareness of progress, of things changing rapidly. But whether people truly grasped the extent of this transformation is debatable. And of course, not all the changes brought about by the Industrial Revolution were good.
Right.
Your sources also mention the downsides.
Yeah.
The grueling working conditions in those factories, the exploitation of child labor, the environmental consequences as pollution became a major issue.
It's like this dark side to progress, this shadow that we often overlook when we just focus on the advancements.
Right.
And these negative impacts, they weren't just abstract concepts, they were the reality for a lot of people.
Yeah.
The text mentions child labor. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Of course. The Industrial Revolution created this huge demand for cheap labor, right?
Right.
And unfortunately, children were often seen as exploitable. Factories, mines, they offered dangerous, unhealthy working conditions.
Yeah.
And children, some as young as 5 or 6, were forced to work long hours for very little pay, subjected to, dangerous machinery, harsh treatment. They were deprived of education and a proper childhood.
It's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And it really makes the Industrial Revolution a much more complex period to think about, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. It's a period of amazing advancements.
Mm-hmm.
But also, these deep social and ethical challenges.
Yeah.
It makes us think about this question of progress at what cost. And it reminds us that even with great innovation, change, there are always winners and losers.
Yeah, that's a really good point. We tend to think about progress as this linear thing,
Right.
always moving upward. But the Industrial Revolution, with all its groundbreaking advancements and devastating consequences, it shows us that it's not that simple.
Exactly. Progress isn't a straight line. It's more like, a tapestry with threads of innovation, exploitation, progress, setbacks, all mixed together. And it's our job to understand those complexities and to learn from the good and the bad from the past.
It's a good reminder that history is rarely black and white. It's full of gray areas, like these complexities that make us really think critically about the choices made by, those who came before us.
Yeah.
And the impact those choices have had.
Exactly. And it makes you think, what are future historians going to say about us, about our time?
Oh, that's a good question.
What events, trends, innovations will they focus on, as like the defining moments of the 21st century?
That's such a fascinating question. Will they look back on our technological advancements with the same kind of mix of awe and apprehension that we view the Industrial Revolution?
Right.
Will they see this era as an era of progress, decline, or, a bit of both?
Yeah. And what will they think about these challenges we're facing, like climate change,
Yeah.
social inequality, political polarization? Will they see the things we're doing to address these issues as successful? Or will they be like, what were they thinking? Why didn't they do more?
It makes you really consider our responsibility to not just learn from history, but to shape it, right?
Yeah.
Like our actions, our decisions. It's all part of the narrative of right now.
It is.
This narrative that future generations are going to inherit.
That's a sobering thought, but also empowering, right?
Yes.
Because we have the chance to learn from past mistakes, to try to achieve progress that, helps everyone,
Mhm.
and leave a legacy that we can all be proud of.
It's been quite the journey today, don't you think? From the collapse of civilizations to the rise of empires, from these heroes that we don't expect to technological revolutions. But I think the one thing that's become clear to me is that history, it's not just about the past.
No.
It's about who we are now and who we want to be in the future.
Well said. It's been great diving into these sources with you.
Likewise.
And hopefully our listeners will come away not just, understanding history a little bit better, but also with this sense of curiosity,
Oh, for sure.
a sense of wonder about the world around them and all the things that have shaped it.
Absolutely. So until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those history books open.
Yes.
Because as we've seen today, the past is never really past. It echoes through the present and shapes the future that we're all building together.